So, at this point, any questions by anybody at this point before we move on to kind of some of the more minutiae of absences, the drivers of avoidable absences, and some of the sources of avoidable absences? Good. We're doing good for time too. So, sources. Where does this come from? Out of the gate, most organizations come to this question and answer it with that, it's just that abuse. Like, we got that abuse dealt with. This would solve our problems. Abuse is important. It does happen. But it's only typically 20% of the sources of your absences. The other one is inconsistency. Is the way absences are managed by division or by supervisor are completely different. Some supervisors want this responsibility. Some supervisors don't really want to be dealing with this matter. I know Joe. I softball with Joe. His doctor's note says he needs to be off indefinitely. So what choices do I have? You don't know the problem exists. Some organizations don't know that they have absence issues, and they show up in many different ways, intermittent absences. But they don't know because they don't track. And remember, 15% of organizations only track at 85% don't track. The other one is there's gaps in the absence program. And we'll talk a bit about the gold standard absence program and the components of a proper functioning absence program in a few slides ahead. But they have glaring gaps. Their policy is unclear, for example. Their approach is bad. There's bad notification of an absence, which means the absence lasted longer than it should, just because poor notification throughout the organization and a really lagged response time to deal with that absence. And the last one is you don't know what's going on with your employee. There's something going on and it's showing up as an absence. Sometimes it's unidentified health issues. Sometimes it sounds like HR issues that turn into an absence. And I use this slogan a lot, and please don't be offended if I use it, but it's, I hate my job, hate my boss, hate my shift, hate my whatever. Not happy at work, HR, clear HR matter, and I feel stress. Doctor's note absence, etc., etc. There's not a platform for that employee to come forward to the organization and for the employee to start with a simple question. And that question is, go get me. It's not, go get me a doctor's note. The question is, how can I help you? What can I do? Let's turn over to the drivers of absence management problems. And we see this every day. We see this every day. It's just not visible from a policy perspective. No one knows what to do when someone goes off work. I think you got to call me. I think I need a doctor's note. There's no prevention plans. One of the drivers is when the organization has not thought of we have people going off. This is a really bad example, but it really drives home the point. During the flu season, 30% of our population are not here because of the flu. And their investment in wellness is really tailored towards Heart Health Week. A real disconnect, if you will. It's a bad example, but you know what I'm getting at. The other drivers is the approach at managing someone who's off. The medical management, the disability management. It's very passive. Passive meaning whatever your doctor says or whatever you think you need is we're hands off. Take the time on you. And some organizations, on the other hand, is no, I need a doctor's note, I need more information. So it's very inconsistent. The biggest one is, we don't track it. So if we don't track it, we don't see it. If we don't see it, then we don't do anything about it. And again, I think I only saw one hand where they're actually tracking absence costs in this room. Let me ask a question here, show of hands. How many of you have seen a doctor's note from an employee that was actually quite useful? Hands up. Not very useful tools, right? Not very useful at all. Off work for medical reasons, but totally rehabilitated on Monday. Another one that plagues organizations is the process to develop early, safe return to work by way of accommodations, restrictions, or limitations takes too long. And usually, the organization wants the HR people, well, then you know what? If the doctor's note was bad, let's just write the doctor again. Let's ask the doctors for functional information. Who does that here? How good is that functional information, everybody? Questionable at best, right? Questionable at best. So you're not medical people. And as soon as a non-medical person contacts a doctor's office, what priority do you think your request for functional information has on a busy GP's office? Goes to the bottom end of that pile. Get to it when I can. So when we look at some of the sources and drivers, I want to highlight probably the biggest one that I see, and it's this. It is the ownership of an absence program. Because it's not well defined, it's a shared responsibility. HR plays a role. Health and safety plays a role. Labor relations may play a role. The union plays a role. It's not owned by anybody. And I like saying this I like making this analogy. If I hire a salesperson, that salesperson has a very clear, accountable goal: grow sales. But when we give this responsibility to whomever in our organization, whether it's HR or health and safety, what goals come along with this? Not very many. Not very many. So, I'm sure this will get a chuckle. I'll share with you a little study that was done in 2015. 822 doctors were asked, of those patients you have that request a doctor's note to be off, how many of those are legitimate? Any guesses? There could be a prize at the end of that table, whoever gets this right. Any guesses?
1 in 10.
1 in 10. Oh man, I don't think I bought that prize. Less than 10. So you're close. Less than 10% of the patients actually warranted that doctor's note to be off. So this goes back to the value of what is at the heart of most absence programs is we like to request doctor's notes. That will give us information. That information, bad information. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it brings up $10 million question. It's a big one. This is like being at the doctor's office, and this slide really says, the analogy I like using here is, we think you may have a cold. And if you have any one of these symptoms, you pretty much have a cold. So what I'll say, as the analogy I'm using here, is if you have any one of these symptoms inside your organization, I want you to put your hands up, because it says that you have some avoidable absence issues. So the first one is costs are rising. Hands up. Absence costs are rising? Yep. Keep them up. The goal is to get 100% of your hands up. That's my goal. There's a disconnect between what your senior leadership team wants from an absence program, they may not even know, and what you're actually delivering on the front line. Hands up. Managers, this is the one that gets it. The managers are not prepared to have these conversations. There's a lack of accountability amongst the stakeholders in the absence process. No one really owns it. I don't know what you do. If it gets difficult and I'm a supervisor, I think my first reaction is I'm going to push it off to HR because they apparently deal with this. Does that happen? Bingo. Inconsistent guidelines. Hands up. We got them all. Literal tracking. No training in absence management. Yeah. Disconnect or siloed approach. And what that means is, if it's a comp situation, you go down that hallway. if it's STD, well, that's Susan. That goes that way. And if it's LTD, well, we think there's a piece of paper somewhere. And this one. Employee sense of entitlement. I don't care what you think. I get 9 days paid, so don't question them. Okay, so everyone here has turned into, y'all have a cold. That's my medical decision. So you all have something that you can work on. This is fixable. There's good ways to fix this, proven ways to fix this, and poor ways to fix this. I call them Band-Aids. My cut keeps bleeding, and I just keep putting Band-Aids on it, but it keeps bleeding. So is the answer more Band-Aids? No. So, this is what most organizations, this is the pathway slide. So, something happens, there's a trigger. Oh, bad employee situation. Its costs are going up, we don't know what we're doing. Great. That's a problem because we're seeing our costs go up, we don't know where they're going up, but it's impacting productivity, it's impacting morale. Great. Let's try some Band-Aids, and they don't work. And Band-Aids, I'll get into the definition of Band-Aids in a second, but there's things like, we need a better policy. Maybe we should just start tracking Joe's absences and figure out why the Friday before every long weekend there's an absence occurrence. If you're in that world, then it's not strategic. If you're in that world, you're not dealing with absences at a strategic level. And I hate using these doctor's notes, but we've all seen these notes, these, at best, confirmation that someone visited a doctor. That's all this says. That's all this says. I actually went to the office and got a piece of paper that says I was here. That's all this note says. In the face of rising costs, some organizations respond to saying, maybe we need to shop our STD program around. Can't be our issue. Must be the insurance company. Sometimes it involves, well, maybe we need to process stuff better. Let's come up with something. Unionized workforce, hands up. How long does it take to change policy as it relates to absences with that stakeholder? It takes a long time. You have a very important stakeholder that needs to be part of that solution. Very long time. Then there's this one. Let's just start actually talking to these physicians to get good information. And I think some of the information in the previous slide shows you that information somewhat useful at best. Just give it to someone else. Okay, we're really taking a stance on absenteeism. Let's just shove this down to the supervisor. Go get it. Oh, you need help? Yeah.